Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership in the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
Oh, this week we start our Fincher Fest with 2007's Zodiac.
Let's
dive into it.
Yeah, let's dive on in. All right, everybody, welcome to Deep Dive Film School. I'm Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Palcher. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, folks. And if you like what you see /hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places people find good media. We do festivals, as we are this week, with starting a new one with David Fincher. We also do punishment reviews. We do forgotten gems. We do all kinds of stuff, all sorts of things. Yeah,
recasting. We need to do another recasting. Comment below on a good recasting episode. Only requirement is that it's 30 years old or older.
Or older. Yeah.
Like technically, we could do like Ferris Bueller's Day Off or something, which is.
That's not a bad one. That's pretty good.
Which makes me feel dated.
Actually, that's a pretty good
Ferris
one.
Bueller.
We need to have more conversations about it because there's some good ones. But let's talk about the Fincher Fest. Let's talk about why we chose the movies that we chose that we're going to be doing the next 4 episodes.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to go through Zodiac, and then we're going to do Social Network. Then we're going to do Mank, his new film coming out on Netflix, and then we're going to end out with The Game. I think probably his 4 lesser known movies. I mean, obviously, his big ones, 7, Fight Club. Those are probably his biggest ones. But he also went on to do great stuff like Panic Room, Gone Girl, which is probably my least favorite of his movies. And then, like House of Cards, he did that as well.
Would actually
Mindhunter.
I would actually say that movie-wise, I'm less a fan of his last handful of movies than I am his series. I thought House of Cards was fantastic. And I thought Mindhunter was incredible.
Oh, hell yeah.
I mean, Mindhunter is basically like Zodiac 2.0.
It's catnip for Sherlock.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's basically like him carrying on what he did in Zodiac, right? Which is like
no doubt.
Lots of guys with loosened ties sitting around in rooms smoking cigarettes and talking about somebody who's a killer, right? And you're like, I could watch this for ages. It's so good. But 2007 with Zodiac, this is kind of the beginning of this thing that he became really known for, which was this slow unwinding of suspense and intrigue with very little action, which is funny coming from a guy who did something like Fight Club, which is so heightened and stylized, and almost the entire thing feels like kinetic action, right? Like Fight Club feels like a tennis ball bouncing off the walls left and right, and then all of a sudden he goes to do this slow burn stuff, and then he's stayed in slow burn for most of his career since, which is
because he's really good at it.
Because he's
really good at it.
Exactly.
I'm sure you will see throughout this festival. I am a massive Fincher nerd. This is my director crush series of a Fincher Fest.
Oh, good. Yeah, there you go.
Like, I mean, if we did Herzog, that would be yours, right?
Yes, that's true.
I think we're gonna have these throughout the life of this show. And but ever since 7, I've been hooked with how he makes a movie. And this movie felt fresh 13 years ago when I saw it in the theater, and it holds up completely today. It is a talkie film, like you said, with an inconclusive ending. So it may not necessarily be for everybody, but I thought this movie was written by Sorkin for some reason. I just assumed it. But it's written by James Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
And the other stuff that he has done, I'm like, huh? You wrote Zodiac? Let me list off some of his other credits. Independence Day, White House Down, Spider-Man 2, which, okay.
I mean,
The Loser, probably the best of those 3 Spider-Man movies.
It's the best of the 3, yeah.
But still hate that series. The Losers and The Rundown. So mostly really average things. Now, obviously, he's playing off the book by Robert Graysmith and stuff like that. So there's source material here. And of course, directed by Fincher.
You know what's interesting about that? And I don't know, Vanderbilt never makes mention of which scripts he's talking about. But apparently when he very first met with Fincher, one of the things that he complained about is he said, everybody always takes my stories and they change the end of the third act to make it into a Hollywood thing. And he's like, I always try to write stuff that's more loose at the end of it. And so when he presented that idea to Fincher read it and was like, that's what I love about this, is that it's real life, where at the end of it, you're just frustrated because you can't, if we're doing a true story, they don't catch the Zodiac. That's the whole thing about the Zodiac in real life, is that he's never caught. Right. And so this idea of don't have that in there, Fincher basically told Vanderbilt, like, no, we're going to stay with this. And then when they were shopping it around, that was the main complaint most studios had, is they were like, there's not a satisfying ending and it's too talky. And Fincher apparently kept saying, yeah, but that's life. Like, that's how life works. No. Life is, there's way too much talking, way too little action, and there's no satisfying conclusion. That's what we're going to lean into. And thank God that none of them changed that, right? None of them backed down from saying that's the most important thing here, because it becomes the sort of talisman of the entire movie. And that's, to me, what makes it into a great film, is the fact that even the characters within that world are saying, this is so frustrating. Why can't we just have a nice bow tied up on our present and here's our killer?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a masterpiece. Of filmmaking. The first time I watched it in the theater, I probably had some of those feelings of not totally getting it. You know, it's a masterpiece in writing and acting. Art direction is an understated element of this movie.
Oh yeah.
The directing, everything is a flawless experience while watching this one. It's because he treats every aspect with exceptional precision. Like, he had trees flown in to a scene by the lake that had devolved over the past 35 years to resemble the murder site more.
Right.
He had trees flown in.
Well,
and you're just like, what he'll go to, like, he is a man who makes a film and does not cut corners. And I totally admire that. Again, big crush.
Well, let's talk about this for a minute, though, because, and obviously I think that we can talk about it in kind of two lanes at once. One, I would just say, is that I feel like Zodiac was so impressive to me the first time seeing it, because obviously, as you're saying, the attention to detail. But the other thing was, it was kind of like, it's funny, obviously there's a lot of connections between David Fincher and Trent Reznor anyway. Like, they've worked together since Seven, right? But I mean, even if you go back to before Seven, when Fincher did Alien 3, like, Alien 3 felt like the first time that somebody sort of from our generation, I mean, granted, Fincher's a couple of years older than us, but at least in the sense of like being sort of like a goth kid or like an industrial music kid, got to make a movie. So when you watched Alien 3, you were like, this does feel like kind of like industrial-ish and gothy and sort of like creepy and weird in the way that he filmed, very heightened, stylized. But you watch that, the clumsy early years of that, even for as amazing as that early stuff Fincher did, the clumsiness of it finally comes to fruition in adulthood with Zodiac. And I would say the same thing happens if you look at Trent Reznor's career. You can look at Pretty Hate Machine. You can look at Broken and Downward Spiral and be like, they're badass, but you're also like, yeah, I get it. You know, I want to fuck you like an animal. Sure, man. It's super edgy. But by the time you get to
all day.
But by the time you get to The Fragile, like Reznor's a little older. He's a little more introspective, and he knows when to really grind down the wheels and when to hold back and give you something beautiful. And that's why, to me, as a 3 LP record, it's one of my favorites, because I'm like, there's restraint here, there's maturity. And so I think that, like, you have Reznor's The Fragile here, and you have Fincher's Zodiac here, where it's like, they know that they can scare the shit out of you, but they don't have to do it all the time, right? And so watching Zodiac and seeing scenes,
it's about setting a mood and atmosphere.
Well, watching a scene of Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr. sitting in the bar together talking about the blue drink is just as entertaining and interesting as when we see the Zodiac by the lake actually kill some kids. And we're like, oh my God, he can do both. And I think that was the first time where I was like, the style doesn't need to be whack you on the head. It can just be this thing that permeates everything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not CSI Zodiac, it's Fincher.
Yes, right. It can just permeate every single scene in this really tasty way.
I agree. It's funny you compare their two careers. I like that because they do both have great style and have that just kind of innate dark sensibility. Like if you look at Fincher's filmography, it's mostly murder stuff. He likes the creation of things. And murder is the creation of something devastating for a lot of people.
You're right. That ripples out and affects all these different characters who have to come together and deal with it.
Also, the start of a revolution in Fight Club, or the start of a social network in the Social Network and stuff like that. So he loves seeing things like from its birth.
Well, and he's gotten more.
Think of Brad Pitt in Seven. We get him right at the beginning of this new job. Something like that. So you're starting fresh with everything that he does, and stylistically just amazing. I love how he tells the story here. He knows when to move quick, but also when to kind of slow it down and talk about the details. I mean, Nolan gets away with talky movies that are way talkier than this.
Now to be fair, we did see him sort of what I like to refer to as like set his leather trench coat on the couch fairly early by his third film, The Game, which we're going to review in this festival, that feels much less stylized and much more nuanced as like a film study. But then he jumps back into that edginess with Fight Club, right? Where he's like doing the CGI stuff where the camera's going around the stove to the Dust Brothers soundtrack and going down into the pipes. And like he does that kind of stuff. But I really think with Zodiac, you see that he's like, you know what? I have all these tools at my disposal, but instead what I'm going to do is just do a fake overhead following a cab as it just moves around a 1970s San Francisco. And that can have the same somehow, and I don't know, like I'm mixing metaphors here, but somehow it's unraveling a mystery while also ratcheting up the tension at the same time.
It's funny, and San Francisco looked beautiful here in the 70s and 80s, thanks to Fincher's practical effects. But earlier when you said that like he had kind of his younger years, like Seven and Alien 3, you can kind of see just like pieces of it. Think of like Aronofsky and Pi. Like you can see elements. You can see some elements of some good genius and definitely some stylized genius.
Right. Because they're like, I'm finally making a movie. I'm here to do my thing, right?
and my first movie that I remember was Seven. And so when you said it was like, oh, it wasn't all there, I would like, my immediate reaction was to take offense and be like, what? How dare you say that about Seven? But the more you talk about it, this is definitely a more grown-up version of him and his restraint and his timing. I mean, you think of someone like Kubrick, his first movie, The Killing, wasn't like his best movie by far, but it's still really good.
Yeah.
And so you can find those elements, but he eventually found that pacing and style mean a lot to an audience.
Yep. Well, his instincts were there from a very early age, and I think that's what has made him into one of the greats. But I do think that the directions he's decided to go make him so much more interesting than if he would have just stuck with the darkness that Seven had. And I say that as someone who loves Seven, but again, it's kind of like, and again, to go back to this music thing, there's so many musical acts that when you hear their first record and it's this seminal piece of art and you go, God, I love this thing, but everybody else loved it too. And so then there's like 5,000 fakers that try to steal the crown, right? And so like everyone's trying to do the darkest serial killer movie on the planet, right? And you just go, and so to watch Fincher then say, well, I'm not going to do that again. And so he pivots to something like The Game, and then he pivots to something like Fight, and he continues to pivot away from these expectations of what he's supposed to do, I think is one of the things that keeps him really fresh and interesting in that way.
I mean, I think that's a similar thing that Scorsese does. Someone like Scorsese makes his reputation on stuff like Raging Bull and Goodfellas and Mean Streets and stuff like that. And he goes back to that when he does The Departed or even Wolf of Wall Street, kind of in a way, and stuff like that. But he also makes like Kundun and what is the one with Daniel Day-Lewis that I'm forgetting? Gangs of New York. Yeah. I guess that's still a similar idea.
But they're different. But they're riffs on a theme. And if I was going to do, not that this is Sherlock's directors as bands thing, but if Fincher is Nine Inch Nails, then Scorsese's Fugazi. Which just means that like he created a style, and then every time it got aped, he just turned it 90 degrees and did something that was like still badass and thematically similar, but different enough that everybody kept chasing him.
And somehow more extreme.
Yes, somehow like even weirder. Exactly.
I was like, oh, you think that's fucked up? Just watch this.
That's nothing. That's nothing. That was 13 songs. This is a repeater. Yeah.
Let's tell you. Oh, yes.
Sorry, this is so nerdy and niche for anybody who doesn't listen to the kind of music we do. I apologize right now.
Let's get into the movie. Let's get into some of the acting here. Like right off the bat, Jake Gyllenhaal, Robert Downey Jr., and Mark Ruffalo. Just right there, you're like, holy shit.
Another in a long line of movies that makes me so happy that the Marvel Universe exists, because it means that somewhere in the multiverse, the Incredible Hulk threatens Iron Man for ruining his investigative lead before having a midnight breakfast with Mysterioso. Now that is some fun shit.
That's a good point. Good point.
It isn't Wonder Boys, but it's close.
Damn it, I was just about to say that. Oh, that's funny.
I don't know that nothing can
with Iron Man.
Nothing can beat that. Nothing can beat the fanfic of Iron Man sleeps with Spider-Man. That's the best all time.
Let's get more into this movie. The whole following of him, and I forgot a lot of the stuff that the Zodiac did that is just messed up. You know, I mean, not only is he like teasing his murders in public, but also taunting the cops, basically saying you're an idiot. You have no idea what you're doing.
Well, and the one of the creepiest parts to me is that he kills that cabbie and then cuts off enough of the cabbie's bloody shirt that he's sending it to them for what, like a year? Like, doesn't he send like 5 letters that have a piece of this shirt in it? And I'm like, that is the forethought to do that, to be like, well, I killed this cabbie, now I better cut off enough of the collar of his bloody shirt so I can just send it over time, like like the world's worst advent calendar, where you're just like, hey, it's July 5th, here's a piece of that bloody shirt so you know it's me.
Oh, that's funny. Let's talk about the abductions in this movie. We only have 2 really, and this is a movie about a murder where the only 2 murders they show of the serial killer's career are murders where the people lived.
Yeah.
So those are the only 2 that Fincher shows us. What a interesting choice of way to approach this. Why do you think he did that? Why do you think it was just for people, just so it didn't seem as morbid?
Well, so there's a couple of, I mean, one thing that that Fincher said in an interview that I really like. He wanted it to, you know, obviously he wants to make a movie, so he wants to have thematically enough of a climax and enough of a character arc. But he also said he really wanted it to look like the truth. And he said the last thing that he wanted to do was to glamorize the killer or tell the story through the killer's eyes. So that's why, like, the Zodiac themselves, even though the movie is named his name and based on the book by Graysmith, I think that, you know, what he said was that would have turned the story into a first-person shooter video game. And I didn't want to make the sort of movie that serial killers would want to own. And I just thought, like, that's got to be interesting. And that has to be a reflection after 7, where 7, you know, the John Doe character is built up into this mythology where we are constantly, you know, if you think about it, in 7, we're constantly with our main 2 characters. The only things they're ever talking about is the killer. And the only thing they're ever doing is looking at the aftermath of what the killer did. So in 7, we see every last little gory detail down to broken off fingernails of what the killer has done.
Sure.
Now in Fight Club, we actually see the violence firsthand, right? The violence in Fight Club is right there in our face. Interestingly, the violence in Seven, for the most part, is all off screen, and then we get the aftermath of it. And to me, Zodiac is both the anti-Seven and the anti-Fight Club. It's purposely turning the camera away from that. This is part of what makes it so mature, is that it doesn't have to spend its time elbowing you in the chest to be like, dude, isn't this edgy? It's about the Zodiac killer. Of course it's edgy. He doesn't need to do any of that. All he needs is one scene of the dude walking over the hill with the black bag on his head, and we are terrified for the rest of the movie.
And knowing how he's going to shoot it is going to just naturally make it edgy anyways, right? Like,
so he knows he can
take away the source material.
He can pull so far back. He doesn't need to linger on crime scenes. We don't need to see there. We don't see a single
kind of funny
body in the morgue. Like, none of that happens here.
No, it's kind of funny how much we bounce around, actually, because we're in this journey. We kind of bounce around the country a lot and through a lot of time. Sometimes it's like 3 months, sometimes it's hours. And it's really interesting. California, Virginia, and they're just trying to solve this puzzle.
He uses that really well, too, because a lot of times movies will sort of unreel that stuff in a way that's comfortable to the audience. And here there is one section towards the end where we are minute by minute, beat by beat. What's going to happen next? And then it fades to black and it says 4 years later. And it might as well say, fuck you later, right? Because we as the audience are like, what do you mean it's been 4 years? You were hot on the trail. Oh God. Right. And it is the most like, and I just thought, we never see that in a movie where it's used as a way to manipulate our audience to make them realize how hard and how unrewarding the job of a detective actually is. Thankless. Yeah. Exactly. And I was like, I loved that. I thought that was such a brilliant way of just being like 4 years later. There you go. And you're like, oh, for sure. Really?
And I mean, like, and they're still trying to unravel and find themes and how he kills and why and the trends and patterns. They still don't know. Like, I mean, it's still a mystery. And he keeps sending more letters and giving them thing and telling them what he's doing in detail. Let's talk about Robert Graysmith's character. Obviously, he wrote the book. He was the cartoonist played by Jake Gyllenhaal here, who was basically just in the room when the first letter gets read and becomes obsessed. He's obsessed with codes and puzzles and sees things. He almost has a beautiful mind, kind of John Nash side of it.
Well, dude, it seems like if it was fake, or not fake, but I guess what I mean is like if it was invented whole cloth by some writer that was like, and then the cartoonist tries to solve it. You would be like, no, that's a bridge too far, man. And that's one of the things that's amazing is that, truth is stranger than fiction in that way. And this is one of the things, and this is one of the ways that Fincher pitched the film to studios, is he said, and this might be a super old reference for a lot of you youngsters out there, but he says, what if Gary Trudeau, and if you don't know who Gary Trudeau has done like a political cartoon called Doonesbury for something like 45 years. Like Doonesbury has been around forever, like since before you and I were born. But he says, what if Gary Trudeau woke up one morning and tried to solve the Son of Sam killings? And I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Because that's exactly who Jake Gyllenhaal is he's this like wide-eyed, naive, Eagle Scout who does these political cartoons. And he's like, I want to help. And then the obsession takes over him. Now, I do wish there would have been a little bit, like, we skip around so much, and that's for the good of the story. I wish there would have been a little bit more of a rich thread of his personal. I would like to know more about why this cartoonist became obsessed with this. And there's too many characters, too many moving parts for us to get to that. We basically meet Chloe's, what's her name?
Chloe Sevignon.
Sevignon, there you go. I can never pronounce her last name. We basically meet her on their first awkward, weird date. And then fast forward to they've been together for years and she's leaving him because of his obsession. And I was like, okay, this is fine, like for the grand tapestry, but he's such an interesting character. I'd like to know more about why was he willing? Like, he loves his son so much. Why is he willing to put his family at risk? I don't know. You know what I mean? That felt like one little weak thread, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's certain things you probably have to sacrifice with a story this complicated and with this many people, because there is it is more about the Zodiac than it is him. But I do agree it would be interesting to know more about him. And
I feel like the first time you watch it, the most interesting thing obviously is the mystery of who the Zodiac really is. And we have this amazing, I mean, come on, man. One of our generation's greatest actors, right?
John Carroll Lynch.
John Carroll Lynch.
Yes, the guy, the husband in Fargo.
Who plays the most lovable doofus.
Yeah,
in Fargo.
Great. He's awesome.
And here, somehow, barely alters his performance for Fargo. Right? He's That's almost funny, the same lovable doofus from Fargo. Yet, if he just turns it slightly, you're like, I don't believe a word this guy is saying. And he's got the right watch. He has the Zodiac watch. He's got the boots. The things he says are just a little
vague,
off, like just vague, just too off. Obviously, same guy who played Twisty the Clown in probably, in my opinion, the best season of American Horror Story. But like, he's just an incredible actor at being able to do something so diametrically different in that way, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's that character if he was a pedophile serial killer.
Pretty much. But then the thing is, like, that's when the first time you watch it, that's what you get, right? And you're like, wow, like you're drawn to that.
That's one of the scenes in the movie, is that scene with John Carroll Lynch.
Completely.
Where they go and interview him. And just the back and forth, I think the writing here is so good.
Oh yeah.
And the back and forth between them and that creepy tone that he does overlay with everything, even when you see him later. And that's kind of where they leave it, because he was the most susceptible person that their highest suspect, even though the evidence wasn't completely there.
And then the guy, the suspect himself in real life, dies and the Zodiac's gone. Right? I mean, but I would say this, that's what you get the first time around. First time around, you are, and I think that's why sometimes, because I feel like I felt the same way you did the first time I watched it, which is at the end of it, I went, oh, it's like I had to sneeze and now I can't. And then the movie ended, right?
Yeah. But you're like, I watched 2.5 hours of that for nothing.
For nothing?
There's no conclusion.
But then upon rewatch, you realize that it's about all these other characters. It's about Mark Ruffalo's character. It's about Jake Gyllenhaal's character. It's about their journey. But at the same time, I guess that's one of the reasons why I would have liked. I don't know. I do this all the time, dude. I do this like Monday morning quarterbacking about movies where I'm like,
sure,
I want more about their family. But then I think like there could have been. There could have been a bunch more in there about the family. And then they showed it to a test audience and they're like, why are we wasting time with Robert Graysmith's family when we want to find out who the Zodiac is?
Exactly. Like I said before, like there's certain things you have to sacrifice, you have to put some kind of thread in there for Jake Gyllenhaal's character.
Yep.
We definitely get that in there's not a lot of basements in California scene.
Oh my God, dude. Okay.
But I think back to that point, it's you kind of like we have to move along to the story, which I agree. When I first saw that, it stuck with me, and it wasn't like it was something I kept thinking about. And the more I thought about it, and then the more I watched it, I believed it even more that this is way more All the President's Men than it is what I originally was going into it from the trailer.
Yeah.
Right. You see the trailer, you think, Zodiac Killer. The guy made 7. Of course I'm in. Like, yes.
Yeah.
Let's do this. And then it's not that. It's much more procedural.
Well, and then the guy, this is one of the reasons why I say it's such a mature film is that, to your point, I watched the trailer. It's about the Zodiac Killer. And it's the guy who directed 7. I'm in. And then you watch it, and the man spends 30 seconds to do this almost like Philip Glass Koyaanisqatsi moment of the building of the Transameric Pyramid Tower, right?
That's right, yeah.
As this time lapse that's completely CGI. The movie didn't need that, right? And the movie could have spent that 30 seconds showing what Fincher imagined that the Zodiac killer's basement actually looked like. And, ooh, here he is, like, drawing his crazy Zodiac symbols on the wall. No, instead we get this, like, beautiful reenactment of the building of the Transamerican Pyramid. And I just went, to me, it's the first movie where I realized this is what CGI is for.
Yeah,
and don't get me
practical.
wrong. The second movie that made me realize what CGI was for was Oakjaw. So I'm not saying that it can't be used to create like mythological characters. It can.
It wasn't the first Avengers movie.
It wasn't. It was not.
Or Avatar.
No. It was Justice League when they got rid of Superman's mustache. No. But it really was when I realized that the entire sequence of where the cab driver is murdered, all of that was done on a blue screen, mainly because A, the neighborhood changed so much, but B, and this was really cool, I thought, which was Fincher went and scouted out the actual location, and then after talking to some people who lived there, they said, yeah, you know what, there's still people here who don't like that remember that, and we really would rather you don't film it here. And he was like, right on. So they took a ton of photos, recreated it on a soundstage, and the entire background is CGI. Like, and I mean CGI, like those are Cinema 4D models of buildings and houses and skylines. And to me, I'm like, that's brilliant. That's what CGI is for.
I completely agree when those impractical effects, it's for me, it's not the explosions or the car chases and stuff like that. Like that stuff's fun and it has its place for sure. But seeing it used here in a way where you don't even notice when it's like it's in every detail, the fact that he cares that much to recreate the whole thing on a soundstage, you can't tell a lick. You can't tell a thing.
You're just in the 60s, man. You're just in the 60s with Mark Ruffalo's giant puffy tie, which apparently the detective, that actual detective, why can't I not think of the detective's names? It's something very strange that Mark Ruffalo portrays. Apparently that detective, this period of his life is so ingrained in his brain that he remembered his outfits at all of the different events. And that's how they were able to reconstruct the outfits that Mark Ruffalo wears, is because the detective was like, mustard yellow vest, I had the brown tie, that had the baby blue stripes on it. Like he remembered, because this is like the most important period of time of his entire life. And so he was amazing. Doling out all this information, and Ruffalo's like writing it all down. They're like, okay, we got to get this to wardrobe.
Get all of this.
Yeah, here's what he was dressed as.
He's great. I love him and Graysmith's relationship. He definitely hates Robert Downey Jr. and their back and forth is really funny.
He really is.
But the how obsessed Graysmith becomes, where he's knocking on his windows at 3 a.m. and shit like that. Like, dude, what are you doing?
It's like, stop calling my house. Down. You need to stop calling my house.
This has been going on for 8 years. What can't wait until the morning time?
So let's get down to these two. There are two, to me anyway, there are two really pivotal, seminal moments in this movie. Obviously, the movie itself, there's tons of moments. But the two that to me make it a great movie, one you already mentioned, which is there aren't that many basements in California. And then the second one is Graysmith's explanation in the diner using the salt and pepper shakers. Those are the two for me. Those are the biggies.
One of my favorite scenes is when he calls into the Melvin Belly show. And we have Brian Cox here, and he's got headaches and yikes, like, oh man, like just hearing him breathe, and this is the Zodiac speaking.
Well, and he screams, like, it gives you chills. He's like, that wasn't me screaming, that was my headache, and you're like, oh boy, okay.
Yeah, something is up. But the basement, the movie poster scene it's his handwriting. That whole thing, and the just the basements in California.
Isn't that that's the one-armed man from The Fugitive, right?
I don't think it is.
If it's not the guy from The Fugitive, I'll put it up here that I'm an idiot and I'm wrong. That sequence is so... Why is it so scary? People have talked about it online as like one of the most like tension-filled moments in a movie that does not.
I think it's because it's you're finally in the room with somebody that could possibly like, and he's by himself. I think it's part of it. He's in a basement. Like that just naturally is already making it feel creepy. But I think it's the moment.
Like we're alone here, but you can see a shadow upstairs or whatever, right? Like
it's the moment that the movie's probably building up to the most, I think, and it's a pretty tension-filled movie, just with how it's made, what it's about, how long you've been waiting for some kind of payoff, and so I think that was probably the emotional payoff for some people.
It's so scary.
It definitely works, and it makes you question it, because, you know, it doesn't mean just because Robert Graysmith says it doesn't mean that he's right, you know, and so you have to kind of think about that too, and just like, oh, I mean, he let him go, so I mean, it could have been a lot scarier.
Yeah, well, and I guess it also lends itself to this weird concept that there might be, which I imagine was huge in the 60s and 70s, like after things like, you know, Manson and like the People's Temple, right? Like this idea that there could be a cult, that it's not, that Zodiac is not one person, but like potentially more than one person. Like I'm sure that also lends itself to that hyper paranoia in that way.
Interesting.
But then this like
amazing movie,
this last sequence of circumstantial evidence. It's circumstantial. Again, that transcends it to a new level that I've never seen before in that way of watching two characters. It feels like something from Glengarry Glen Ross, which obviously Fincher has to love, right? I mean, he's utilized actors from that movie multiple times. You know, a lot of Fincher's later stuff, especially House of Cards, feels like moments stripped directly from Mamet. But that where he's just like, here's where he lived and here's where that first victim lived, right? And he's like, and Graysmith is so amped up, and Ruffalo's character is just like, are you serious? Really? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, circumstantial evidence, man. Like it is like
they really rely a lot on the handwriting. Obviously, that's a big part of it because he's written so many letters. But they keep going back to Phil Baker Hall's character and hoping to find something, and eventually he does.
He does, but at that point, it's so frustrating because it all. And I love that we're left with that little moment from what is it, Jimmy? What's the actor's name from It's Always Sunny and Westworld? He's the guy who comes, he's the older version of the kid from the very first killing. That's who that is that comes in, and he's like, he points to Lee Allen's picture, and he's like, that's him. But it's Duder. It's it's one of the McPoyles.
Yeah, Westworld. Yeah. Okay, I know who you're talking about.
It's McPoyle.
Yeah.
We'll put his name up here. I'm so sorry. He's a great actor.
Him and his brother are hilarious and Always Sunny.
Oh yeah. But like he shows up and he basically gives us our maybe.
Yep.
And then at that point, then you get the title card that's like, and he died. Mwah. Your mystery's gone.
Well, I think for what they can do, obviously it's not totally conclusive, but how they find Alan in the hardware shop at the end. He's definitely the number one guy, the obvious one, but still no justice is ever served. So people feel unsatisfied when stuff like that doesn't happen in movies. They want happy endings. And like Fincher wants and says, that's not real life. Real life is slow and methodical.
And that's what makes
sometimes can't understand it and you can't solve it.
Well, that's what makes this movie brilliant, is it leans into that from frame one. From frame one, it leans into that where there's even a moment of Robert Downey Jr.'s character talking to Jake Gyllenhaal's character and saying, how do you think this is going to end? Do you think this is going to end with us catching the bad guy? That's not real life. That's not how this works, right? Like, and I think that that's so important that the movie leans in and accepts that way before we as the audience do. Because we go, no, this is a Hollywood film. It won't do that. And it's like, no, it's based on real life. It's not. It's going to end in this neutered kind of climax, which is exactly what it needs to do.
Yeah. That's how the world felt when it wasn't solved.
Exactly.
How are you supposed to feel? Last thing I'll say, underrated Robert Downey Jr. performance. He's awesome here.
Completely.
So good.
Last thing I'll say, even though it's supposed to be the low point in his life, I would totally live on that houseboat that he's living in. That thing looked cool as hell, man. I would totally live on that houseboat. A couple of dogs and my wife? Are you kidding? I would totally live on the houseboat.
On a boat? Go out on the water?
It's supposed to be like, oh, look how bad he's done. I'm like, that's cozy as fuck. That looks amazing. I would totally live on the houseboat. It's adorable.
He's boozy as hell in this movie, but he's great.
He is.
Good old reliable Robert Downey Jr. All right. Well, thanks very much for listening, folks. Please like and subscribe. We're going to continue our Fincher Fest next week with The Social Network. After that, we're going to get into Mank, and then we're going to get into The Game. And I don't know if we've decided our fifth part of the festival yet, but we will figure it out with something something fun. All right. Thanks a lot for watching, guys.
See ya.
See ya. Okay.
So I my one dog, Ollie, is blind now, right? Like I've told you this.
I have one of those.
He has zero eyesight. And there's a dog park that we go up to kind of just barely up the canyon. And yesterday I was like, oh, I'm going to take the dogs to the dog park. And so I took him there and let him off leash, and they're doing great. And there's other dogs there and stuff. And all I did was pick up some bags of poop. We were there 5 minutes and went to throw them away. And right as you enter this dog park, there's this like 5-foot cement culvert that kind of like separates the dog park from not the dog park. But there's no fence or anything. My little blind dog Ollie's looking for me and does the one thing I've been like dreading this whole year since he's gone blind, which is he starts trucking right towards the culvert. And I like turned and was like, no. But him hearing my voice is like, there he is. And starts trucking towards me. And he goes down it head first. And I don't even think. I dove head first like I was catching a giant fuzzy football and grabbed him. But he still hit. He got a big cut on his chin. But I fucked up my hands and my arms and my shoulders. Damn. I landed fully like face first on the concrete. I thought it would snap my glasses off.
Holy shit, man.
And he laid there for a second and was kind of like, and I was like, oh my God. And, like a dog, when it cuts its head, there's blood everywhere. But he was fine. He just was in shock for a second. And all these people ran over and they were like, what's going on? What's going on? And I was like, he fell. And they were like, not the dog, you, old man. Like you jumped in head first into this like cement culvert. And I totally I fucked myself up so bad. He's fine now. He's running around. No problem. But
you're a mess.
Oh my God, dude. Like when you're little,
you can't do that when you're over 40.
Dude, when you're little, you fall out of a tree and you go like, zzz, and you're like, whoa, I think I knocked myself out. And then you go about your week and you don't care. I am in so much pain. So Abby's like, she was over the moon though. She was like, you saved our little dog. And I was like, I know, but I'm in.
Yeah, you're like Kramer on the bus with the finger.
I just went for it, man. I was like,
they kept ringing the bell.
Yeah, got in there, man. And but I'm like,
you're a hero. You're a hero.
I'm a hero. He's still hit, but he's fine. I'm the one that's messed up.
Adam, it pays to be a hero.
Does it though? Well, what Abby said was, like, well, if you were walking home from a friend's house drunk and fell into a 5-foot cement culvert, you'd have to make up a story that you were saving your dog.